Hi, Terry Ryder from Hotspotting, bringing you my regular weekly feature at this time, Hotspot of the Week. This week today in fact, we published our most important report right now, which is the Top 5 Regional Victoria Hotspots report. Why is it the most important? Well, because regional Victoria is the strongest, most buoyant market anywhere in Australia right now. And so we've selected the 5 markets that we think will show the most upside for property investors moving forward. And tonight I'm going to focus on just one of the locations that's included in the top 5, new entry in fact into our hotspotting reports, the river town of Echuca. But first, a little bit of background. As I said, regional Victoria, strongest market in the country, most buoyant market, busiest market, the market where there are the most locations with prices rising in double digits, and by that I mean by more than 10% in annual terms. Just to give you one example, we have a report on the website for the local government area, or rather oddly named Baw, B-A-W, which includes a number of towns to the south east of the Melbourne metropolitan area, including Warragul, Druin, Trafalgar and Moe. This is a market that's had some remarkable growth in the last couple of years. It's probably now past its peak. The level of growth in annual terms is starting to wind back a little bit, but it's still very, very high. And I want to emphasize these markets because we've been told every day in our major newspapers like the Australian, the Sydney Morning Herald, and other forms of mainstream media that prices are falling across Australia and that markets are in rapid decline. Well, it simply isn't so, and regional Victoria is one of many examples where markets are buoyant and prices are rising. Now, in the local government area of Baw, the growth in the last 12 months in median prices include the town of Druin, which is up 19%. In the last 12 months, Longwarry is up 11%, Moe 10%, Trafalgar 13%, and the largest town in the precinct, Warragul, its median price right now is 22% higher than it was 12 months ago. It's now 464 sales, house sales in Warragul in the last 12 months. The median price is now 430,000 after rising 22%. Now, that's just one of many growth markets. I could cite numerous other examples with similar levels of growth right now. You're not hearing about them because our media is addicted to negative sensation and they're not interested in giving you any good news stories. So that's where we're filling the void. We're here to bring you some of the good news that's happening out there in real estate markets. If you're a property investor looking for somewhere that might show you a little bit of growth in these interesting times in which we live. So another contender amongst many, and we've just newly included this location in the new edition of Top 5 Regional Victoria Hotspots, and it's the town of Echuca. And it's firstly one of the most consistent markets in the country. I'll tell you why I say that in a moment. But it's one of the Murray River towns. It's at the border between Victoria and New South Wales. It's twin town or twin city. On the other side of the river is Moama, and together they form a metropolitan area or a small city area of about 20,000 people, of which 13,000 are in Echuca. It first came to our attention when we were doing our quarterly editions of the Price Predictor Index. Now, for the Price Predictor Index, we go through the whole of Australia, town by town, suburb by suburb, look at every location, looking at the patterns in sales volumes, because whatever's happening with sales volume is going to dictate what happens with prices, all other things being equal. So if sales activity, sales volumes, which means demand, is rising, then prices will follow. If sales demand is falling away, we're likely to see price growth come to a halt, and in some cases prices will fall, which is something that we saw in Sydney. And just with reference to that, we predicted the decline in the Sydney market long before it started popping up in mainstream media, because we could see the falling away of sales activity Sydney actually peaked in 2015-16, but it wasn't until 2017 that it started to show up in price trends, because prices tend to lag sales activity. So with the price predictor index, we're looking for trends of demand, and we're not just looking for the growth markets, and we're not just looking for the markets that are in steep decline, because they're the ones we would warn you about as danger markets. We're also looking for the consistent ones, because these are good markets for property investors who value safety and solidity to invest in. Markets that have consistent sales regardless of what's going on in the markets around them, regardless of what's going on in the local, the state economy or the national economy. Those consistent markets are going to be very, very safe places to buy, and they do show good price growth. Now, Echuca has stood out. For the last 5 years, every quarter pretty much has the town has recorded somewhere between 73 and 89 sales, quarter after quarter, for the last 5 years. So that in one of our 2017 editions of the Price Predictor Index, we always have a top 50 list of the most consistent markets in the country, and we pick one and we name it the most consistent market in the country. Well, in one of those 2017 editions, it was in fact the spring 2017 edition, we named this location, Echuca, as the most consistent market in the country. And that consistency, together with some growth dynamics happening in the local economy, is starting to produce some pretty good price growth. In fact, the town's median house price has risen 14% in the last 12 months. So, yeah, this is a town with a major history because of its historic port, the port of Echuca on the Murray River. It's got a history of paddle steamers and river trade, and it's still a key part of the economic and lifestyle of this town, because tourism is one of the major drivers of the local economy. It sits in the heartland of the Goulburn Valley. It's one of the nation's biggest producers of dairy products, but also produces lots of fruits like peaches, pears, and apricots. It's become popular with retirees and tree changers because it's got a nice location on the river, and it's very affordable. Median price right now is in the mid 300,000s, and as I say, very consistent market. It's on the Murray River, about 225 kilometres north of Melbourne. It's strategically located, not only because it's on the river, but because it's at the junction of 3 important highways, including the Cobb Highway and the Murray Valley Highway. It's also near the junction of 3 major rivers, so it's difficult to imagine a regional town more strategically located than being near the junction of 3 major rivers and at the intersection of 3 major highways. And indeed, I think the name Echuca means, in one of the indigenous languages, meeting of the waters, I think. So it was founded in white terms. It was founded in the mid-19th century. The historic port of Echuca still plays a very important role in the economic and lifestyle life of the town. At one point, it was the largest inland port in Australia. It's featured in popular culture. It was in prominence in the novel All the Rivers Run by the Australian author Nancy Cato, which was adapted into a television miniseries in the 1980s, starring, of course, Sigrid Thornton, who seems to have been a star of all those Australiana-type miniseries of that time. It's still the paddle steamer capital of Australia. Tourism's big, agriculture is big, healthcare, manufacturing are major employers as well. So it's got one of those things we like in a regional centre, diversity in its economy. It's not dependent just on agriculture or just on tourism. It's got various elements to its economic life, and that's a strong thing. It's part of the Goulburn Valley Food Bowl, a region which produces 25% of the total value of Victoria's agricultural production. It's one of the most productive dairy areas in all of Australia, and it's about 70 kilometres from Shepparton, which is the location for one of the world's largest fruit canneries run by SPC Ardmona. It's connected to Melbourne by rail services. You can get on a train in Melbourne, go to Seymour, and then connect with the line that goes up to Shepparton and on beyond there to Echuca. So that's the economic and demographic background of the town. Its property market is interesting in a number of ways. Firstly, because it's so incredibly consistent, and I refer again to our quarterly surveys of sales activity, and for the past 5 years, that's 20 consecutive quarters. The number of house sales in the town has been somewhere between 73 and 90 per quarter. That's remarkable consistency, given that sort of major markets like Melbourne have been through a boom and then a bust in that time. It just keeps on chugging along. It's been often referred to by the national valuation firm Herentide White in its monthly property review. It's one of the locations in regional Australia that it has featured on a number of occasions, pointing out, amongst other things, that it has a lot of properties with large allotments of above 1,000 square metres that are very affordable by city standards, and which have the potential perhaps to be subdivided or to be redeveloped with units or townhouses. Vacancy is right now very low. The vacancy rate for Echuca itself is 1.3%, and across the river, the twin town of Moama on the other side of the river in New South Wales, its vacancy rate similarly is 1.2%. Over 250 house sales in the town's market in the last 12 months, so it's been busy. Median price 360,000, having grown 14% in the last 12 months and still growing, and yields are typically above 5%. So many factors in the basic numbers. The property market might attract an investor. Low vacancies, strong rents, strong rental yields, affordable prices, and prices are growing in double digits just at the moment. There's a little bit going on in the background that's going to keep the local economy strong. One of them is they're building a second bridge over the Murray River. That's under construction, a $280 million project to improve connectivity between Echuca and Moama. We've also got upcoming an upgrade to the rail links between Bendigo and Echuca. That's almost $100 million been spent on that with funding from both the federal and state governments. That's approved but hasn't started yet, I think. So it's just one of those places that would always fly under the radar screen of most property investors. I imagine only a very small percentage of the Australian population has ever been to this town, and only has a passing awareness of its existence, but it's just one of those heartland of Australia places that I'm always interested in, because they play a very important role in the life of the nation, and as a property market, they're steady and consistent, they're growing, they're affordable, they have good rental yields, they're worth considering, and because this market is so consistent, it's a very safe place to buy. But the sort of growth that it's showing at the moment is certainly not the exception. It's very much the rule in regional Australia at the moment. Just to give you some other examples of locations around regional Victoria that are showing strong growth. The town of Port Fairy, a very cute seaside town down in the southwest of Victoria, a lifestyle town that's very popular. Its median price has risen 26% in the last 12 months. Lakes Entrance, way out on the other side of Victoria, out in the far east of Melbourne, its median price is up 13%. The town of Bright is up 17%. Wangaratta, heading sort of north from Melbourne up towards Albury-Wodonga, it's up 14%. Another town that I've recently researched on behalf of a client I didn't know too much about until recently, Benalla, its median price has risen 10%. Why is that market starting to pump? Well, because partly because at least that a local business has won a major contract to supply concrete to a major infrastructure project in Melbourne, the Westgate Tunnel. It's creating 400 local jobs, which is huge for a town of that size. So, well, we're all probably aware of the big growth we've seen recently in Geelong, just outside of Melbourne, but also now Ballarat and Bendigo are rising markets. And in between those larger regional centres and the Melbourne metropolitan area, we have towns in areas like Mitchell Shire and the Mason and Ranges local government area, Kyneton, Seymour, etc., which have been attracting a lot of buyers out of Melbourne because of their lifestyle and affordability, and prices been growing very strongly there. So that's why we've updated our top 5 Victorian hotspots report. As I say, I think it's the most important one in terms of the one that investors should be interested in buying the most, because this is the #1 growth market in the country. It's affordable, lots of locations have good rental yields, vacancies are low, and prices are rising in double digits in many cases. So it's one to take notice of if you can get beyond the mentality that's pervasive because of the negativity of our media telling us that prices are down everywhere, markets are falling. These markets are doing exactly the opposite, and I hope you're all aware of them and will consider them rather than sitting on your hands waiting to see the election result. If you're buying in these sorts of places, what happens in the election is pretty irrelevant. If you're worried about changes to negative gearing, it becomes irrelevant when you buy in locations like these where you can typically get rental yields above 6%. You're not negatively geared when you've got a rental yield above 6% and you're borrowing below 4% perhaps. Negative gearing becomes irrelevant. So I think many people who would otherwise be investing at the moment are doing nothing because they are concerned about the uncertainty. Well, if they're thinking clearly and understand the way these things work, it will be business as usual, and you'll be looking to invest in locations like Ballarat and Bendigo and the one that I featured tonight because of the many reasons I've mentioned. Its consistency, its affordability, and its growth economy, Echuca, on the Murray River at the New South Wales border, 225 kilometres north of Melbourne. Okay, that's it for now. That's Hotspot of the Week for this week. Let's do it again same time next week. Ryder signing off. Talk to you again soon.